round of media appearances, Rudy Giuliani today torched 2 years of Donald Trump's collusion denials, muddying the waters to a near unrecognizable condition as he spirals deeper into incoherent scenarios about what the president did and didn't know about the Trump Tower meeting. That meeting is now at the heart of the obstruction of justice investigation and is perhaps also being investigated as part of a conspiracy to coordinate with a known American adversary. Here are two of the president's closest allies and advisors debuting the new line on Russian collusion. Not that it didn't happen, as Donald Trump has insisted on a near daily basis, but that if it did, it wouldn't really matter because, well, collusion isn't a crime.
Collusion is not a crime. And so the fact of the matter is that we're a long way away yet from having anything to talk about here.
I've been sitting here looking in the federal code trying to find collusion as a crime.
It's not.
Collusion is not a crime.
It's right after conspiracy. Giuliani also potentially creating more problems for the president by describing what sounds like a detail planning meeting, one that took place 2 days before that meeting with the Russians.
Lanny Davis has added that there was a meeting 2 days before the meeting took place with Donald Jr., Jared, Manafort, and two others, Gates, and one more person.
And that's a real meeting. You're saying that's
a real meeting on another provable subject in which he would not participate. This meeting that Cohen's talking about took place before the meeting with the Russians. But the other thing that's contradicted is Cohen also now says, because he says too much, that 2 days before he would participate in a meeting with roughly the same group of people, but not the president, definitely not the president, in which they were talking about the strategy of the meeting with the Russians.
To be clear, that was cleanup of a walk back of a cleanup. And to update you, Giuliani later tried to walk back said cleanup, but questions about whether such a meeting took place remain. Our friend Matt Miller live tweeting Giuliani's blunder, saying this, quote, "A penny for White House counsel Emmett Flood's thoughts as he watches Rudy incriminate the president on live television, possibly with actual evidence of wrongdoing, possibly with third-hand gossip." Here to help us sift through the day's developments, some of our favorite reporters and friends. White House Bureau Chief for the Washington Post, Phil Rucker, former Assistant Director at the FBI for Counterintelligence, Frank Figliuzzi. In New York with us today, NBC News foreign correspondent Keir Simmons, and Jennifer Rubin, an opinion writer with the Washington Post. Let me start with you, Frank Figliuzzi, because I understand the talking point is now that collusion isn't a crime. But to be clear, Bob Mueller isn't investigating non-criminal collusion. He's looking for crimes.
He's very much looking for crime. And in fact, if you look in my dictionary, which I just did for the definition of collusion, it says illegal cooperation or conspiracy. So really, we should stop using the phrase collusion and just say criminal conspiracy. There's a host of criminal charges that could come into play here if it's proven that there was so-called collusion. What are those charges? Look, if it's proven that Russian money was flowing into the campaign, you've got election and campaign contribution violations. You have violations of the emoluments clause. If they were masking the origin of Russian money, then you could have bank fraud and wire fraud and money laundering. And there's conspiracy, and there's accessory after the fact, depending on when they knew what was happening. And here's a key on the hacking. If indeed they can show that campaign officials gave a green light or knew or encouraged the hacking into the DNC, then you've got the same violations, the cybercrime, the computer fraud and abuse charges that we saw lobbed onto the Russian hackers. You see conspiracy charges against the president or his campaign officials. So it is about crime.
And Phil Rucker, there must be at some level some awareness that liability or exposure around one or more of those crimes is at least possible as an explanation for their evolving defense. We put together how they keep moving the goalposts. Let's watch and talk about it on the other side.
Are there any ties between Mr. Trump, you or your campaign, and Putin and his regime?
No, there are not. It's absurd, and there's no basis to it.
I have nothing to do with Russia. To the best of my knowledge, no person that I deal with does.
An acquaintance, sent me this email as a courtesy to him. I said, okay, let's meet.
I didn't know anything about the meeting. It must have been a very unimportant meeting because I never even heard about it. There's been no collusion. No collusion. There was no collusion at all.
I'm not even know if that's a crime, colluding about Russians.
So, Phil, the excuse in the defense is often, well, he didn't obstruct justice. He did it all on Twitter. We now know Bob Mueller is examining his tweets and his public statements. The other defense for a long time was collusion isn't a crime. We now heard from Frank Figliuzzi that there are obvious and clear crimes under collusion around conspiracy. The White House at some level has either intuited this and shifted their defense, or they're simply moving the goalposts for their hardcore supporters. Which do you think it is?
Well, first of all, what Rudy Giuliani is out there saying is not at all coordinated with the White House. I think the White House would prefer that he keep quiet and be a lawyer who writes memos and deals with paper instead of going on television all the time. But what we've seen, what you just played in that clip, is that the president's, legal defense all along has really just been a PR strategy. It's been all about messaging, undermining Mueller, trying to convince his supporters and anyone else who's listening that he's done nothing wrong without really delving into the nuances and the details of what the actual law is, what the actual circumstances that are under review might be, and offering this sort of blanket no collusion defense that the president's been making all the time, including this weekend on Twitter.
And Keir, you cover the Trump Tower meeting. You cover the Russians who were in that meeting, and you interviewed Natalia Veselnitskaya. It is clear now from your reporting and others that they are tied to the Russian government, that this was a setup, and either they were unwitting or witting. And it seems to me that the goalposts have shifted as the evidence has become clear, even to the general public.
The ties to the Russian government are indisputable because Russian oligarchs, billionaires are like that with the Russian government. Look,
But it's not like in America where really rich people have to disclose their donations. I mean, there are no lines between...
I've seen them mixing together again and again. Look, Aras Agalarov, the Trump of Russia, they call him, the guy who was looking at building a Trump Tower in Moscow, who helped organize the Miss Universe competition. In my Instagram feed, just in the past few days, take a look at this picture. We found a picture here. That's Aras Agalarov standing next to Dmitry Peskov. In the past few days, it looks like they're on vacation together. Dmitry Peskov is President Putin's spokesman. He is so close to President Putin, it's inexplicable. So this is not hidden. This is hiding in plain sight. These are all part of the same Russian establishment.
And Donald Trump's ties to these individuals are hiding in plain sight as well. We know that his son wrote back in an email, "I love it," when he was offered dirt from this gang on Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, I like to think of it as that these are obscenely rich people talking to other obscenely rich people. I mean, that's who the Trumps are. That's who the Agalovs are. Frankly, that's who the Russian leadership are. They have a lot of money, even though it's hidden away, and they kind of behave the way you would expect obscenely rich people to behave. They want to talk to each other. They don't see any reason in not building communication lines. They have children who they empower, who are often entitled. They treat many people like pawns. These are people who are behaving in incredibly human ways. I mean, for the Russians, this is about trying to figure out how to make more money. Let's get rid of sanctions. Why? Because we want to make more money. Let's get into the U.S. economy because we want to make more money. Politics is part of that. And, of course, that is the way the president thinks. And many people support him for that reason.
Frank Figliuzzi, enter Bob Mueller, who has now charged 13 Russian officials for meddling in our election. Now, whether I don't think that anyone is putting their money on Donald Trump actually asking Vladimir Putin to extradite those Russian officials. In fact, they have a plan to jointly investigate Americans and Russians that was trotted out in Helsinki. But does that change the equation for Donald Trump, who does not exist in this world that Keir describes, where Russian oligarchs intermingle at the highest levels of the Russian government?
You know, it's important here to make a distinction between really rich people in the United States and really rich people in Russia. And from the world that I come from, Nicole, it's about the nexus to the intelligence services and the government. You're allowed to become rich in Russia. You are inextricably linked to the hierarchy of government. And if you look at the people who were charged in the first Russian indictments that Mueller issued in the social media propaganda initiative, you can see the connections directly to Putin through the oligarchs and that money being used to stage and set up the operation, right? And the plausible deniability that exists that allows Putin to go, hey, those were some rich people doing some political thing. That's not our intelligence service. That's horse manure. The linkage is well established between oligarchs and the government and the intelligence services. And that's important for us to remember.
And we came in this way, Jennifer, today because there's always a cause and effect. As unhinged and deranged as the Twitter feed of the President of the United States somehow appears, there may be a link between what we've been talking about and the tweets, which are the harshest we've seen yet against Robert Mueller, re-upped yesterday. The president tweeting that Robert Mueller is conflicted because he was turned down for the job of FBI director, for which, here it is Robert Mueller ever going to release his conflicts of interest with respect to President Trump, speaking about himself in the third person, raising a different category of questions, including the fact that we had a very nasty and contentious business relationship. I turned him down to head the FBI one day before the appointment of special counsel, and Comey is his close friend. I understand from sources that he and Comey are not particularly close friends, and he was in there interviewing to be FBI director, but I don't understand it to be Donald Trump who turned him down. I think the other conflict that the president's talking about is some altercation about a golf club. We also know, though, that the president wanted to fire Mueller, and it was Don McGahn, the White House counsel, who threatened to quit if he did that, and that Mueller is looking at the decision to fire the special counsel running the investigation into him as part of the obstruction of justice picture and the criminal intent. So I heard you say on Friday that these questions go to the heart of his legitimacy as president.
Right. That's what he's been afraid of all along, that people would look at the Russia connection and conclude, gosh, this guy didn't win on his own. He won because his buddies in Moscow hacked the DNC, released them at a very opportune time, maybe did a bunch of social media stuff. And you know what? He's right. Americans don't like their elections being interfered with. And if there was substantial connection, and we're seeing more and more connections, then yes, his greatest fear is going to come true. The other thing that's so remarkable about this is, what did we learn? Mueller is looking at his tweets. And what does he do? He tweets. Tweets threats to the special prosecutor, tweets about wanting to get rid of the attorney general because he wouldn't do his bidding on recusal. The interaction of the tweets, the actions, and the behavior of his surrogates and his allies is something that Mueller is putting together in the mother of all timelines. And you're going to see, I think, at the end of this, a compilation of every comment Trump was saying publicly, what he was saying privately. The most stunning thing that I found is on the day that Donald Trump Jr. gets that email, do you want to come and find some dirt on Hillary Clinton? And he emails back, I love it. Trump goes out and makes a speech about 7 hours later saying, I'm going to have a speech on Hillary Clinton. You're going to get all the dirt. You can see how the network works back and forth. And those emails and those tweets are going to be the corroborating evidence. People say, well, you know, Michael Cohen could be making things up. He could be lying. You know what? There's going to be a lot of corroboration because of the president's own words, his own tweets, the behavior of all the people around him. And we haven't even gotten to flipping Paul Manafort yet.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.